Um, Paola, will you be giving me a countdown?
Yes.
Okay.
One, two, three.
Hi, everyone. This is Hugo Salamanca from the International Energy Agency, and welcome to this workshop on indicators for the industry in South Africa with a special focus on pulp and paper and the automotive industry. I'll be giving a few more minutes to our colleagues to join. But just to give you a bit of housekeeping remarks, maybe next slide, please. Yes, please don't hesitate to ask any questions as we go through the discussions. You have a button on the screen in the left, sorry, in the bottom side of the screen. We'll be trying to address them if time allows for discussion. And as mentioned, just a few minutes before we start to give a few more opportunity to our colleagues to join. Thank you. Okay, hopefully everyone has had time to join us. So let me welcome you once more to all the colleagues able to join and all the panelists. I will now be giving the hand to Maputi Legodi, Deputy Director of Energy Efficiency Projects at the Department of Mineral Resources, South Africa, who has kindly stepped in for Mr. Mabusela, who is facing some connection issues. For opening remarks, over to you, Mr. Legodi, if you can please unmute and put the camera on. Thank you. I see we've had some technical issues. Paola, apparently he has been logged out. If we can sort this out. Maybe in the meantime, if I can then give the hand to Melanie Slade, who is the Senior Manager of the Energy Efficiency and Emerging Economies Program here at the IEA, while Mr. Maputi is able to log back in. Thank you, Mel.
Many thanks, Hugo. And many thanks to everybody who's listening in on this workshop today. This is one of a series where we are exploring the availability of data at the sectoral level, energy data, the sort of data we need for designing effective energy efficiency policies, setting targets and tracking progress. So we've invited stakeholders who work in the industry, who support industry, in research organisations, stakeholders who may have access to data, certain data sets, and others who need data and analysis to be able to carry out their functions effectively. So, as I said, this is part of a series of workshops that will help support the Department of Minerals and Energy Resources in implementing the National Energy Efficiency Strategy for South Africa. And so that's a really important strategy, and it relies on having good quality data and analysis to back up the energy efficiency policies that will be designed and implemented. It's also really important, of course, for industry that the government's using good data so that the policies that are being proposed are well designed and able to be implemented and really have the outcomes that everybody hopes to see. So I didn't want to say any more than that, but just to say welcome, thank you for coming. Hopefully this will lead to us opening up ideas about what data's there, where we might find things, and being able to start the process of sharing so that we can work together in the coming years. So thank you, Hugo, and I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Mel. And apologies, we are still facing some issues with our colleague from DMRE, Mr. Mafutile Godi. While we try to fix this, I might follow on to our first speaker. And so just to maybe give you an overview of today's workshop, we'll be having 3 presentations today, one from our colleague, Thomas Algozi from the data center here at the IEA. We'll be then joined by our colleague from DMRE, Mr. Lobullo and Giovanni, to give some updates on energy balances in South Africa. Then our colleague from Sanedi will be presenting on the 12L tax incentive with some highlights for the 2 sectors that we're focusing on today, automobile and pulp and paper industry. And that will leave us with quite a few minutes, hopefully 40, 45 minutes for a panel discussion with all the stakeholders of the industry that are today with us, and that we thank for joining once more. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to my colleague Thomas for the data side of things. Thank you, Thomas.
Well, thank you very much all for joining us today. I am Thomas Algozi, statistician at the IEA, and I will now explain why we think at the IEA that energy efficiency indicators are very important for all stakeholders. So we will start with linking good data to good policies and good decision making. Then we will look at end-use data and energy efficiency indicators generally, to then focus on industry for those 2 subsectors of concern today. And finally, I will present some IEA resources that might be of interest here. So obviously, the industry sector has many impacts and benefits in the economic life and in the technological and social life of the country. But when coupled to energy efficiency, it can also help meet the social development goals, such as SDG 9 and 7, which are about inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and about affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. So to achieve this, obviously some tracking is absolutely essential. So we will start with looking at the need for energy efficiency data and at indicators. In the case of South Africa, in 2005, the National Energy Efficiency Strategy included targets for improvements in energy efficiency. Importantly, a strong target was put on industry and mining, about minus 15% of the demand decrease. And it has been realized thanks to monitoring that the energy intensity of the sector has been strongly decreasing over the course of 12 years. but now we should think what is needed to understand how much of this decrease is attributable to energy efficiency in itself, how we can monitor that as well in the future. Going forward, if we are to achieve any kind of climate objective, and especially the net zero path that is being discussed a lot these days, if we look at the IEA net zero report, we can see that the efficiency improvements represent the largest share of the reduction targets for the final consumption in this industry as soon as 2030 and also in 2050. And similarly, the end uses represent the largest clean energy investment in all targets from the past decade to 2050. So to track such targets and adapt the policies until then, and maybe achieve these goals even a bit before, we need obviously some statistics. In addition to this future path, if we look a bit at the past, we can see that forcing demand and supply in all time scales is absolutely key for a robust economy. Load shedding, for instance, is often related to maintenance, to forecast, and sometimes to incidents. And thanks to data management, costs to the economy can be reduced significantly for all stakeholders, both governments and private companies, by minimizing the impact of the load shedding and also help manage and advance infrastructure. The risk, of course, is to, in case of reduced data collection and reduced analysis capability, is to repeat the 2008 energy crisis and electricity crisis in South Africa, where the demand growth was faster than expected, and rationing had to be put in place at the large cost of large industrial companies and of the whole industrial sector. So now that we're all convinced that these data are absolutely essential, let's look at what kind of data is needed and what they can bring in more detail. So data on energy demand feeds sectoral policy design and infrastructure planning. We start with the energy balance, which is the pillar of energy data. It gives the total final energy consumption and also the detail about sectors and fuel. It also gives the details by subsector. And even though the South African data is still incomplete, there's been a lot of progress going on, and it needs all types of stakeholders to be improved. And the following step would be to go a bit further to understand the drivers of the demand, and for this we need energy efficiency indicators. Indeed, if we look at, for instance, the IEA data for 2018, we can see that the demand for industrial sector is largely composed of the demand for ferrous metals and chemicals, followed by paper and printing. If we are to understand better why this demand appears and what it is due to, we need some activity data to understand energy intensity and gather more information and comparability between different sectors and different plants in different countries. For instance, so the energy intensity, which is energy per value added, being a good proxy for energy efficiency. If we look at that indicator, we know that manufacturing is more intensive than the services. This is simply due to the industrial processes in place, but gathering data by subsector, both on the energy side and on the activity side, helps us build more detailed indicators for each subsector, and we can see that basic metals and paper and printing are actually very energy-intensive subsectors, while things like machinery or automotive manufacturing are less intensive. Now, if we think more generally at how we can build energy efficiency indicators for the industry, we need, as I said, two types of data: the energy consumption data by subsector and activity data. The energy consumption by subsector has to be detailed by, for instance, pulp and paper or iron and steel, and also for the less intensive subsectors like automotive industry or the textile. And it has to be put in regard to value added when the subsector is very heterogeneous and we don't have a physical production item which is easy to relate to, such as steel or cement in these cases, which is a lot more homogeneous. But still, it's good to keep in mind that physical production is often a better activity data to build energy efficiency indicators, as we don't need to put in place things like purchase power parity or various conversions on the value added to compare different regions and different countries. With this kind of data, one can analyze the trends of the energy consumption. So we can see here on this graph the total final consumption of the IEA countries until 2018. On top of this has been built projections of what would have been the consumption if we had not had some savings due to efficiency in the different sectors. And we can see, for instance, that industry in purple is a very important one in terms of the accumulated energy savings. It used to be the main one until the end of the past decade, and now it's basically on par with savings from the buildings, so residential and commercial and services buildings. It is also very interesting that we can use this kind of data to understand better the trends in terms of not only the efficiency, but also what part of the savings are due to activity changes or changes in the structure of the economy. But we will not focus on that now. And we will dive in the two specific subsectors that we're interested in today. So as a follow-up on the 2005 national strategy in South Africa, various conclusions could be taken. First, that energy density is not an excellent proxy for energy efficiency within the industry and mining sector, and other indicators could be developed to complete them, and also that some data has been collected already. It would be excellent to be able to continue so that the trends can be followed up on a longer time scale. So one of the two subsectors we want to discuss today is pulp and paper. It's the sixth largest export to China, and it used to be stronger with very strong national companies. It is, as we said, an energy-intensive sector, so it's also interesting in terms of understanding the future trends of the demand. In terms of classification, it is gathered with usually with printing and production of recorded media, ISIC 18. In ISIC 17, you have the pulp and the paper products. And it could be very interesting to start with to think about an indicator that would be only focusing on ISIC 17, so just pulp and paper. And for this, it would be interesting to develop, to think about a physical production of paper with some product that would be representative of the whole sector of South Africa. Now, if we think a bit further at what type of other options we have to zoom in this sector and build energy efficiency indicators, we can see that we can first go beyond the simple ISIC subsector of paper and printing and split between paper on one side and printing on the other. And even in paper, we could divide between pulp on one side and paper on the other. Now, if we look at another option, which is to divide by product type, we could develop indicators specific to the pulp or specific to the paper, recovered paper, and another one specific for paper and paperboard, with all different types of products that would be interesting to compare. And finally, we could use a disaggregation by a process or technology, focusing on the efficiency of different mills and different technologies, and see what can be done. With all this, it would be it can be very interesting to develop benchmarking type of data. This benchmarking can be used at least for two different things. The first one is to set plausible ranges for indicators, and that could be used by all types of production plants and so on, and in different countries, if we take into account the context of each of them, so that we can understand why there might be differences and why some of them might be higher or lower within this range. Another thing is to follow the trends of the evolution of different regions, different countries, different subparts of the industry, and see how they evolve. And finally, another key thing that can be taken from benchmarking is identify the best available technologies for each different product. And actually, if we divide this time by technology, we can also see that it helps put in place ambitious but still reachable targets for energy saving, because we could develop strategies in the long term with this kind of benchmarking in mind. Now, if we look a bit further into the automotive industry, so the South African automotive industry is a world-class one with the support of up to 113,000 jobs. Is contributing a lot to the overall GDP, around 6%. It has also many other impacts in terms, for instance, of exports to the EU or to the US, and also things which are a bit harder to evaluate, such as the technology absorption, the development of new skills, and of industrial capabilities. In terms of classification, it is gathered into ISIC 29, so motor vehicles, trailers, and semi-trailers. It doesn't include some parts of the supply chain like the batteries, but within ISIC 30, there's most of the other parts other than batteries which are included, which is why they are also often gathered together. Again, as for pulp and paper, a first low-hanging fruit indicator would be to develop some indicator for energy consumption by value added, this time for ISIC 29 only. The issue being that automotive industry is a more heterogeneous subsector, as we are going to see. Because indeed, if we look at the other options that we had, as for pulp and paper, we can develop indicators beyond the ISIC subsectors, and especially split between the motor vehicles, the trailers, and the semi-trailers. We can also look at product types, and here it can be also very interesting because it is heterogeneous. It can be even more interesting to divide by product type, to disaggregate a bit and put some more homogeneous subcategories. So you could have the bodies, you could have the assembly lines themselves, or you could focus on some specific parts of the supply chain, like maybe safety belts, airbag doors, and some other features like that. And finally, we can focus on split by technology or processes, as we have had for pulp and paper. Now, if we want to quickly look at what is available from the IEA, we wanted simply to present to you, if you're not aware of, for instance, these energy efficiency indicator manuals. We have two of them, one on how to collect the data, and it is detailed by different types of data and also by sector. So it's very interesting. You also have one called Essentials for Policymakers, which take the next step, which is how to develop and also interpret these indicators and use them into policy making. These are available in different languages, and they're also available in another format, which is e-learning courses. So on our platform, we have basically the same content, but put up in a different format. We also have obviously our yearly publication. So in 2021, we have end-use data and indicators for 44 countries, which were published, including countries like Brazil or Morocco, and countries also beyond the IEA family. On our webpage, we have, you can find easily the documentation and various information about this database. And we hope, obviously, to have South Africa very soon among these countries. Finally, I wanted to quickly talk about this country practice database. It is a database that gathers experiences of various countries to put up new data collection. It can be surveying, can be modeling, and then you can find information about similar countries in similar contexts, which may have wanted to develop something, and they give you their experience so that you don't start from scratch. Very quickly to conclude, we've seen that energy efficiency in industry is absolutely central, especially if we have in mind the Sustainable Development Goals. The indicators are absolutely key to track the progress that has been made and the impact from different policies. These indicators start from a sound energy balance, but it has to be completed with new data, and this new data can be collected for using appropriate methodologies which are common to many countries. And to start, the first step is to identify the national priorities, and especially in each sector, which are the key data and the key indicators that are to be built. With this, I will give you back the floor, Hugo, and I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Thomas, very much for this. I think we have Mr. Legodi back with us. So before I give him the floor, I wanted to thank you, Thomas, for very well setting the scene, highlighting the benefits from energy efficiency and how data is even more important for this sector that that relies very much on the proof that it's bringing to it. Also wanted to thank you to remind that there are benefits both from government and policy development, but also from the industry side in having access to better data. Also thanking you to these key indicators or examples of indicators for these two subsectors that will be one of the major topics that we'll be discussing in the panel discussion later. And of course, thank you for reminding our different colleagues of the resources that the IEA has that is free of access, and we hope can be of support to your work. With that, I will hand the floor to Mr. Legodi. Thank you for bearing with us and having reconnected. Maputi, over to you.
Thank you, Hugo. I apologize, colleagues, for having struggled a bit to connect. I connected earlier on, but then the link kicked me out. I'm not sure if I'm audible. Okay. Should I show my face?
Please. Always nice to see you, Maputi. And yes, if before we go over to Luvuyo's update of the work DMRE is doing, just having you highlight this initiative that DMRE is pushing very forward on indicators and data in the industry sector would be very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think Hugo, you're correct. Just to put this into perspective, from the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy side, we are very much committed to ensuring that we address the energy efficiency component within the industrial sector, and we have found it necessary to divide the sector into subsectors so that we can focus specifically on certain areas in terms of addressing different challenges for different subsectors in the industry. And I think from our side, we are very much into ensuring that the data collection is as efficient as possible. We are currently developing the mandatory energy data supply regulations with a view to ensure that we get as much data as possible from the industry in order for us to be able to map the way forward, both in terms of policy as well as in terms of the programs that we would want to introduce around energy efficiency for specific subsector. So I think for us, this type of forums are very critical so that we can share our ideas and understand what other countries around the world are doing in terms of ensuring that they also focus on some of the areas that we are focusing on, primarily to ensure that we share experiences, we sort of follow the same path and understand what are the challenges that one may encounter, although they are differing from country to country, but in the main they are similar in terms of how government and the industry sector operates. So I think for us this is critical, and we are committed to ensuring that we get as much information, as much as experience, as much as data available around the world to understand how best can we implement our systems or our programs to ensure that we get the support from the industry in so far as data collection are concerned or data supply is concerned, but also to ensure that we also support them as government to make sure that they find their participation to be seamless, to be not difficult for them to comply with some of the requirements that we would put in place for them to comply with. So I think for us, this is critical, and we are very much committed to continuing in the way that we are running now, eventually to have a fully fledged data supply system and data analysis system that would enable us to provide a better policy path and policy certainty around energy efficiency. And I think I welcome all colleagues who are participating today. I think your contribution is very critical for us, and feel free to contribute, to ask questions, to seek clarity where possible, so that we can walk out of here with clear mind of what needs to happen going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lekodipo, for these remarks, and I would like to stress out that this is a topic, indicators and data that we are developing with our E4 partners, in particular on pulp and paper and less energy-intensive sectors, with our colleagues in Brazil, colleagues in Indonesia, and South Africa is opening the path. So I would like to congratulate DMRE for this great work that it's been handling and the targets that it has set. Now I would like to hand it over to our colleague Luguyo and Giovanni for some updates on the work that DMRE has been doing on the ETMS and energy balances. Over to you, Luguyo, if we don't have any further connection issues.
Okay, good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you.
I can
with the video. Maybe if I may continue as is. I think on our side, just to make a brief reference to what we've actually done so far with regards to the National Energy Efficiency Strategy and what achievements we've realized previously up until 2015, and what we have drafted in terms of the post-2015 National Energy Efficiency Strategy. If you may recall, since the release of the 2005 NES, several legislative frameworks and kind of measurements were developed and implemented to support the energy efficiency strategy, and also the implementation of standards. These included the minimum energy performance standards, equipment appliances, energy efficiency tax incentives, adoption of efficient technologies, and energy efficiency monitoring system, and the South African national standards that were developed thereafter. We noted that these interventions have resulted in overall energy efficiency improvements by 2015 against the baseline of year 2000, as confirmed through the National Energy Efficiency Target Monitoring System. The results that we've realized in 2015, when we have made the assessment, is that if we focus on industry, there's been about 28.6% improvement in energy efficiency, which was achieved by then. Power sector about 9%, residential sector 10% achievement. With a target of 10%, there was an improvement of 25% in the residential sector. The commercial and public sector, with a target of 15%, we realized 1.5% improvement. In the transport sector, 9.3% reduction in energy efficiency strategy. This was done through the energy efficiency target monitoring system, just to monitor and check how far are we to the targets that were set out in the National Energy Efficiency Strategy, which was developed in 2005. After 2015, we've developed what we term the post-2015 National Energy Efficiency Strategy, which has proposed the result framework is follows. That at the bottom, where you see the red parts, we look at the measures for each sectors. At the middle sector, middle part, where we have blue area, we look at the targets for each sector, including industry, which has its own target as well. And at the top, we look at the total level impacts that are achieved nationally. So that's how we develop and actually read what we propose in the post-2015 needs. The key elements of post-2015 needs are as follows. You see, a vision that requires the promotion of energy efficiency as the first fuel to ensure balanced, socially inclusive, and environmental sustainable economic growth, job creation, and leading technological innovation across the region. Also, we proposed constant support to businesses, households, and industry associations to take advantage of the energy efficiency opportunities of increased availability and good quality energy efficiency technology on the local market. Energy efficiency policy measures that are expected to deliver economic growth and sectoral energy efficiency improvement by 2030, as proposed in the post-2015 needs. The proposed targets are as follows: economic-wide, 16% reduction in energy consumption, public buildings 6%, municipal services 20%, industry and mining 60% reduction in weighted mean average of energy consumption, and cumulative total energy savings in the mining sector of 40 petajoules. In the agricultural sector, proposed target of electricity saving of 1 petajoule. In the energy production, we also propose 10% derived from cogeneration, and also a reduction in the losses and also in the non-technical losses of 0.5%. The commercial sector, we propose a 87% reduction in the specific energy consumption. The residential sector, 33% in the average specific energy consumption of new household appliances, and also improvement in the average performance of residential building stock of 41%. And lastly, in the transport sector, there is proposal for 20% reduction in the average vehicle intensity. In a nutshell, these are some of the ambitions that the strategy proposes. And hence today, when we meet, we seek to learn more from industry, and also as we partnered with IA in this part of the energy indicators, we hope to learn more again so that at least we can improve the strategy in itself, because the proposal is that every 5 years, there will be a review of the strategy in terms of the target, etc. So the input today would be very much helpful to the department and also to the country, and every input is much appreciated. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Luvuyo, for this overview of the current and the past work on target setting. And as we can see, it highlights the need for data to able both to track progress and to make value of the work that has been achieved. On that front, I wanted now to hand it over to our colleague from SANEDI that will be presenting on the 12L tax incentives and key highlights for the industry. Over to you, Stalin.
Afternoon, colleagues, and afternoon, delegates. I'll be presenting on the 12L tax incentives with a theme of turning energy efficiency into profit. Hugo, you are sharing my presentation.
Apologies, yes. If you can just say next slide when necessary, our colleagues will take care of it.
Okay. Okay, apologies for that. You can go to the next slide. So the theme of the presentation is turning energy efficiency into profit. You can go to the next slide. Section 12L tax incentive is a program which was established according to the Income Tax Act of 1962. It provides an allowance for business to implement energy efficient savings. The savings allow for a tax reduction of 95 cents per kilowatt hour saved on energy consumption. So SANEDI adjudicates on all submissions through a panel of experts, both internal and external. Now, the certified savings must adhere to two standards. One by a standard is the SANAS 50,010 of 2018 and the Section 12L regulation as promulgated in November of 2013. The overall program objective is to encourage energy efficient processes and to accelerate an uptake of cleaner technologies and innovation to promote a reduction in demand for energy and resulting in a reduction in carbon dioxide emissions. Next slide. For each application, it goes through project registration, which is on our online 12L system. And at project registration, if the project adheres to the regulation, it will then go into a baseline submission, where a baseline is compiled by an accredited MNV specialist, and it has to adhere to the 50,010 SANAS 50,010 of 2018 standard. The baseline submission will be evaluated and accepted by a panel of MNV expert evaluators, both internally within SANEDI and external. After the baseline submission, the project will go into implementation, and that energy efficient initiative will be implemented, and then which will be followed by a performance assessment submission. At performance assessment, the PA report will detail the achieved savings and impacts, document evidence and data supporting the energy savings, and then the PA report will also be evaluated and accepted by a panel of both internal and external MNV experts. After the PA has been accepted, a 12L tax certificate will be issued with the tax incentive value. So for this presentation, we will focus, next slide, we will focus on the two sub-sectors of which are pulp and paper and the automotive. In the pulp and paper, we have received and adjudicated on 18 energy efficient projects which have received 12L tax certificates. They are coming from 4 companies. There have been a low uptake within the industry, and we hope that if there are industry leaders in the who are listening, they can take on this initiative and do more energy efficient initiatives within their industry. Overall impacts from the pulp and paper industry is close to 1,346 gigawatt hours in energy consumption reduction and 1.30 megatons of carbon dioxide reduction, which has a monetary value of 945 million in tax incentives. And all these projects are coming from 4 provinces in South Africa, 1 in Eastern Cape, 10 in Gauteng, 5 in KwaZulu-Natal, 2 in Mpumalanga. You can go to the next slide. Basically here you can see the spread of those projects, with Gauteng having more of these energy efficient initiatives within pulp and paper. And also if you look at the energy impacts per province, 67% of all those achieved savings are coming from Gauteng, and KwaZulu-Natal is number 2 with 29%. You can move to the next slide. On the automotive industry, we have seen a low uptake of this initiative, and the Section 12L is still ongoing up until the 31st of December 2022. So we encourage industry leaders to take up this this initiative and do applications on behalf of the industry and implement energy efficient projects. So 4 of these energy efficient projects have been implemented, and they are awarded with certificates. They are coming from 2 companies, and all of them are from the Eastern Cape, with the overall impact of 70 gigawatt hours achieved savings, 0.07 megatons of carbon dioxide reduction, and 66 million in tax incentives value achieved. I will hand over back to you, Hugo, and we can accept. We can answer questions.
Thank you, Stalin. This indeed is very interesting data that you have here, and I'm sure it will be discussed in the panel discussion that is coming now. Just to highlight how data plays a key role, again, in policy development, as we just saw Stalin highlight the role that measure and verification plays in setting, for example, the baseline, but also to be able to quantify savings, to quantify CO2 savings, to quantify tax or incentive in this role. We will be now moving to the panel discussion, where we have gathered today a number of stakeholders, key stakeholders from both the industry, the government, different government bodies, research institution, the academy, and other organizations. I might ask all the panelists to turn on their camera, and we'll be having interactive discussion moderated by our E4 program manager, Mel. So Mel, I'll hand it over to you, and she will be joined by Teslin from Sanedi for questions with the panelists. Over to you, Mel.
Thank you very much, Hugo, and thank you for the presentations. If, as Hugo said, the panelists could all turn their cameras on, then I know who I'm talking to and who I can call upon, and that would be great. So whilst we're waiting for people to come through, I'd actually like to turn first to Rosalind, if I may. You've heard these discussions. You know about the National Energy Efficiency Strategy. You know how important it is that government gets policy settings right. Sometimes there's a bit of a tension between industry having data, how much it can be shared. Could you just start perhaps by talking about how you use data within the company to manage your processes, and then what you feel about sharing that with government to make sure policy is set appropriately?
Yeah, so I'm here on behalf of Impact, but also a shared hat with our industry association, PAMSA. And it's always been our position and also our experience, and I can talk from the Impact experience and just how our 3 paper mills are not really comparable to each other at all. But we've been having this discussion on and off for quite a number of years. And you'll see the success of the discussion with the different gazetted factors for the Z factor for energy efficiency in the carbon tax. We eventually came together on a factor that would be our scope 1 and our scope 2 emissions across all mills divided by production tonnages of both pulp and paper. But as we were even calculating them, I mean, I can talk from the Impact experience. We obviously have Chinese walls between the other companies, so I can't see their data. But I was very surprised in sort of the shift in the data and the information from year to year, even with not large technological changes. And our 3 mills are wildly different from each other in terms of the number, even using the same methodology to do the calculation. So what we normally do is we tend to work with improvement of the baseline of the paper mill itself. And we work at trying to improve the specific paper mill, whether it's in our case, Felixton, Piet Retief or Springs, and just make sure that we're more energy efficient than we were the year before when taking into account factors like production. We're also quite influenced by the markets. And I think probably a lot of people on the panel will know about the supply demand imbalances that we're seeing in paper at the moment. So it's quite difficult for us to get RCF or recycled fiber, which is a key feedstock into a lot of our mills and a lot of our processes. It's also one of the opportunities that allows us to be more energy efficient, because reprocessing RCF is a lot less energy intensive than releasing the fibers from virgin wood products, chipping, pulping, and running sort of the associated processing technologies like Copeland reactors, etc. We've also seen probably a little bit of a decline in some energy efficiency as we've had to push up our own production of electricity, and we're looking more and more at that because of grid instability and the problems that we get. We are part of curtailment, and it is a helpful solution, and we do have parts of the plant that we can switch on and switch off. But if we want to meet our full production and we want to start generating with back pressure, we don't run our condensing turbine because it's just not economical yet. But this could change in the future. And that's also, we then see a big uptick in our scope 1 emissions, but we do see our scope 2 emissions going down. But unfortunately, it's requirements to fill our product and our order book. We've also seen that we're using quite a bit more energy at the moment with the trend and the shift from plastics to higher wet strength and higher strength papers, and with paper and carton board that gets exported. I was interested in the presentation and all the factors, but there's quite a bit of difference for us, and we make a lot of cardboard boxes. In the top line and the bottom, the top and the bottom versus the liner or the fluting. And the liner or the fluting can have a lot higher recycled content, so that tends to be slightly more energy efficient to produce just by the nature of starting with paper versus starting from virgin fiber. But with more export, with fruits, vegetables, with products that could have temperature sensitivity, we find we're also using more and more virgin fiber, and then there's also higher energy requirements because of it. We've seen also just on challenges with energy efficiency. One of the big things we do is we look for high efficiency class motors, because we do have quite a lot of motors. But we've seen really, really crazy increases in the motors, but really driven by the way that both steel and copper have been escalating. It's unclear yet whether this will mean that we might have to do an additional rewind before we can put in CapEx for a new motor. We're very much hoping that this won't be the case. We've obviously also seen like increased energy prices, so these might balance out, but we're still actually working on the analyses and working on the negotiations with the suppliers of motors. And we see this in quite a few aspects of plant and equipment. In terms of our bigger projects, we've seen also some uncertainty. A lot of it, especially when it's coming from overseas, is driven quite heavily on the exchange rates. And sort of small swings in the exchange rate can make a really, really big difference in our project cost, and can, in the sensitivity, sort of push things away from being sort of viable if the exchange rate shifts enough. And on that, we've also seen massive increases, as I'm sure everybody has worldwide, in logistics and container prices coming in. Sorry, I keep looking down because I made some notes in the preparation session.
It's very interesting. Carry on, please.
And then I think overall, and this is maybe a statement for the whole of the energy efficiency economy in South Africa, I think sort of the sentiment and the implementation and achievement on projects has somewhat been a little bit marred by the early days when there were very sort of onerous shared savings contracts, and it's made people quite hesitant as to sort of what the future is. There's a lot of things that seem really, really great now, like you don't pay the capex, but a lot of companies have gone for very, very long lock-in periods for sharing savings of projects, and a lot of companies are feeling quite hesitant about that. So I think there's probably a case for sort of more upfront presentation of the business case, the financials, the indicators for energy efficiency projects before we give the go ahead, so everybody's quite aware on what's happening. Yeah, so I think that's it. We do work hard at energy efficiency. We do have some of those 12L projects that were on the list. We have a few more that are coming soon. Yeah, and we just work for continuous improvement against our baselines of our individual mills from year to year.
Brilliant, thanks. Just going back to that individual mill issue. Have you identified why the performance of each mill is so different?
So I can talk just to our paper mills, but sort of not to the whole industry. Sure. And we have 3. And even though they're all making packaging papers, they're quite different. So Springs up in Gauteng has the only liquid packaging plant, and there we're able to recycle poly-L and recover that fiber. But that is obviously a very different process and different pulping to the rest of the mills. We also there don't go from wood. We have fiber sheets. So it's virgin fiber sheets that have been processed, and that provides sort of our high strength virgin fibers and the high quality white top lining for printing. And then we have RCF there as well. So that's their pulping process, and they've got 3 separate feeds. The Piet Retief mill still has actual wood fibers coming in. So they'll have chipper wood processing, they'll have RCF as well. And Felixton at the moment is running only on recycled fiber. So coming into the machine already, the flows are quite different. Then we go into the machine, we have the wire, we have the vacuum systems. So our two mills, Springs and Piet Retief, are running on older liquid ring vacuum systems, whereas our Felixton mill is running on a new turbo vac blower system. It's very, very efficient, but also very costly, difficult to implement and difficult to control. It's something that we're looking at taking across, but we've been working on it for a number of years. And we think that there's maybe sort of the point to decide. But even if we decide now, the lead time on these projects means that we'll probably see this in 2025, 2026, if the capital can be raised and be found. Then we go into the drying section. I'm making it sort of simple, and if anybody wants to jump in at any point from the paper industry and help me out, do feel free. So we press the water out as much as possible, and that's an opportunity for some energy efficiency as well. There's newer shoe press technology that will get it drier and then save us energy in the steam section, but not all the mills have that. Then when you're in the hood and you're doing the drying, there's technology where you can actually cover the whole hood to have better heat recovery. We're also looking at trying to recover dry heat, but this is sort of very, very brand new in terms of sort of energy efficiency and process. And there it depends on, we're supplying the steam by boilers. We go back to our boiler house. There's a lot to be considered in terms of boiler energy efficiency, in terms of the fuels that are feeding these boilers, and in terms of flexibility of operation. I mean, if all of a sudden there's a break and you're in the paper, then we've got all the steam, there's this massive pressure. We can't stop the boilers, especially if the break's going to be quick and it's going to be easy to resolve. They don't pull back quickly. They're not very, very agile on that. So yeah, there's a lot that influences the energy efficiency of the drying section. Then we get to the end and then we sort of rewind it. So that's sort of how energy is used in our process. But when we do the regressions, we often run into multiple variable regressions to accurately describe the process. And it's quite related not just to production. We also see regressions with significant correlations with heating degree days, with cooling degree days. We've worked with some where we've got electricity generation and we see decent fits with that. We've not yet been able to make a reasonable multivariable regression that looks into our different product outputs, because there's too many products and different sort of types of paper coming out of the mill. But we know that that's also one of the things that's very, very sort of important to how we are using energy, like we were talking about, sort of how much virgin fiber is going into the product that's leaving.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you very much for that. And maybe just to change tack slightly, if we could go to Professor Raj Naidu from the University of Pretoria to ask, you know, from the academic side, from people who do analysis, what's your experience been at trying to access sufficiently disaggregated data to be able to make that you think that governments could use to make kind of policy decisions? Do you think it's out there? Do you think it's findable, or do you think it's not possible?
I think, thank you very much, firstly, for inviting me to the panel. If you look at your indicators, you get different levels of indicators. You get detailed indicators, and then you get system level indicators. So at a very detailed level, for example, at a motor or at a certain load in a plant, I think where technology has evolved to, you can very easily now measure at a detailed level. And then obviously that rolls up to the system level. So I think what needs to happen is from a government perspective, the vision is quite clear for balanced and socially inclusive, energy efficient economic growth whilst creating jobs. But it's with that vision in mind, it's very important to that the indicators, whatever indicators is derived for the different sectors, is very clearly aligned to those to that vision. And I think at a detail level, if there's more use of technology, you can get much more accurate data at a system level, which would then align to government's vision. So I definitely do think there's opportunities for improving data and data accuracy, but as we stand, I do think there's a huge gap, in the industry, and also just sharing of data. Many industries don't want to share data between themselves, which makes it very difficult for benchmarking. So it's a tough challenge, but I really do think in going forward, we need to leverage technology for the detailed indicators, and which then can be rolled up to system level and then benchmarked against the different industries. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Rosalind, what would your response be about the data that you have? Can you imagine a system where that you could potentially, as an industry, report data into a system that so that people can't tell, it's anonymized, that could be used for governments? Is that at all feasible, do you think, or not?
Again, I think a good place to start is the gazetted carbon tax energy efficiency allowance, where you'll see on an anonymized basis the different indicators for the Z factor that I'm speaking about. So we do have it there, but the challenge is as soon as you have a look at it, you'll see really how different paper mills operate. There's no reasonable way to take a median or a mean and have that data be meaningful. Our worry is that we perhaps get sort of an onerous target, and we comply. We do everything that we can to. I'm smiling at Mr. X's son. I saw him come in the background, working from home. We do everything that we can to comply, and we do report on an anonymous basis. Well, yeah, on a confidential basis, data at a per plant level to DFFE for our reporting requirements, both in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, and now we're going to start with carbon budget as well. But we're quite sensitive about that because there's definitely ability for confidential information and insight to be gleaned if the data gets into the hands of the right party that understands exactly what they're looking at when they're seeing it. So while we work together a lot, we drive both energy and emissions reduction very strongly as an industry. And when we've seen it come down, I think across the whole industry, we're just quite nervous to have a broad sweeping target come in, and perhaps we have another year where we actually just can't get hold of enough RCF to make our products, or we have years where we have an order book that's filled with paper that's meant to be made from high virgin fiber, and the way we operate, even though it's exactly the same mill and the same equipment, it just looks absolutely nothing like the year before. And it's not that we're being wasteful or inefficient, it's just that's what it has taken to produce the product.
Understood. Yeah, very interesting. It's great to see these levels of details. We have a Mr. X on the screen, and I just wondered what Mr. X's background is, and whether there's something pertinent to this topic he'd like to introduce. I apologise for not knowing your name. would you like to say something? You're muted. Oh, I think we've lost him now. Okay. I think that possibly Alf is on the line. Are you there, Alf? If you
Yes,
are,
well, I am.
great to hear you. I was just wondering, you know, you know all about these issues, have with all of the experience you have in auditing. Can you see a way, given digital technologies that are available now, given that it's less costly to sub-meter, and both in terms of sensors and telecommunications, can you see a way where we could get over some of the problems that Rosalind has talked about, so that we can do, you know, multivariate regression, but with a lot of variables in a meaningful way, so that you could make up an indicator for a particular plant based on, you know, the raw materials going in and the product coming out, so that variation can be from month to month, from year to year, can actually be, you know, relatively simply accounted for. Is that at all possible, or is that science fiction?
No, it is possible, and I'm reminded of what the US DOE tried to do by having a regression model in the cloud where you uploaded your independent variable data and it gave you the answer. But I'm also acutely aware of another practice that they developed within the STEAM system scoping tool, which allowed users of STEAM systems to load the results of this scoping anonymized, and this would go into a database where you could do benchmarking. And that's why benchmarking scares the heck out of me, because a lot of times it's so unfair or unequally done, and the results extrapolated are used to then reach decisions on relative performance, and I don't believe that that is a really good measure. But coming back to the question that you and Rosalind were discussing, Mel, I find that we have from an IEE project perspective, we have toiled and really worked and thought hard about how we can support DMRE and how we can support government at large to have a data-rich policy development environment. And one of the initiatives that we are currently undergoing, and we see this as a legacy project, and at the end of this, I'd like for Professor Sulaiman Gould just to share, but he's also in the audience, is that we map energy consumption in South Africa across all 9 provinces, across by municipal boundary, across all subsectors, and in all industries, and by all energy sources, to gain an understanding of how energy is consumed in South Africa. And those are anonymized data. And we look at it by energy source, and we can establish a baseline period whenever we want to. But the real secret and to me the interesting element of this study and this exercise is that we encourage these participating companies to update their data independently annually at a particular date. We can incentivize that so that it gives DMRE, it allows DMRE access to very updated relevant data. And with getting data updates annually through this mapping study and platform, DMRE can then start tracking sectoral performances. Now, when you get down to the micro aspects of how you compare one paper plant with another paper plant, that's another element and challenge in and of itself. And I think the biggest value right now to South Africa is that we get onto that list of IE nations that are tracking their data and energy consumption data. But more importantly, and it's encouraging to see 2019 data presented by IEA earlier today by Thomas. That is so refreshing, because we've always worked with old data in South Africa. So if we can continue to provide DMRE with current relevant data that's accurate and meaningful, so that we can develop policy that really hits the sweet spot, instead of having broad brushes of it that advantages some and disadvantages others, then I believe we are on the right path. We can dig into the detail that Rosalind shared, and I think there are opportunities, and I've seen some of that in Canada. I've seen some applications where the use of digitalization enables real-time monitoring, and we can start looking at those later on. But to me, the major imperative right now is to enable data-rich policy development in South Africa. Thanks, Mel.
Thanks very much, Alf. Insightful as always. Just a thought. So if we can't do this easily by sector because of the variations, I mean, for the time being, how about, and you touched on this, Alf, but how about taking some of the end uses that we know are critical and looking at steam raising, say, so not just in pulp and paper, but in all of the low temperature process industries that use somewhat similar technologies. Is it from a policy perspective now? Is it worth us trying to take a look at things like that? We wanted to talk a bit today, if we could, about automotive too. So compressed air is another obvious one. What's the opportunity there to, instead of sub-metering, plants entirely, sub-meter some of those really key end uses and learn across sectors thematically what energy efficiency options exist, and therefore what policies could stimulate their uptake. Yeah. Would anybody like to comment on that? You could start, Alf, yeah?
If I may, it's a brilliant point. And it deals with the complexity of trying to compare kilowatt hours per motor car produced by Volkswagen and Daimler-Benz, completely different. And it means it becomes meaningless, and you start to try and compare car brands at the level with each other. So what you are saying is, to me, really the way we should be doing it, where we look at a compressed air system within an automotive environment, and from one automotive environment to the other, or a chiller system for that matter, for a paint shop, and from one automotive assembly plant to another, you can start benchmarking, you can start developing some very good metrics on the performance of the energy system per se instead of the process. You can do the same for electric motors in a range of different environments. So yes, I believe that what you are referring to and what you raised is indeed a way where we can do more meaningful benchmarking of system performance within and across sectors. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to come back on that? Maputi, how does that sound to you?
Thank you, Milan. I think what Alf is saying is correct. It's very interesting because one would understand that it is very difficult to go into the details of how different companies operate in terms of coming out with the similar output. There are different systems in place, and I think to use a similar approach in terms of how we analyze the electricity consumption would be difficult and would be dangerous to the industry. So at times, I think what would be required would be to allow the industry to provide data, credible data into the system that is trusted, into the system that is safe. And in a way, the onus now would be on government to see how best they can analyze the data to try and understand how different sectors of the industry or different user group have a specific electricity usage pattern as compared to the other. And that would also assist us in terms of understanding what sort of indicators and measures should we therefore put in place to try and drive energy efficiency in specific sector, as long as we can understand how individual sectors are operating and the type of data that they supply onto the system, and how can we manipulate that data to best suit us in terms of putting in place measures. So I think that approach would work very well for us in terms of policy development and setting up of targets and indicators for specific sector.
Thank you. But one argument is that by doing this, you'd move away from a kind of sectoral approach, and you'd be looking at more of a thematic approach that's multi-sectoral. So if you're looking at steam raising, if you're looking at compressed air, you wouldn't necessarily be able to set an industry, a sector target. You'd still be able to design, energy efficiency policy, but it would be a different approach. You wouldn't be driving a sector target. Mr. X now has his hand up. I'm so sorry. If you go to the top right-hand corner of your screen to the three dots that say more, you can actually change your name.
Oh,
so
okay. Now I think I would rather remain
anonymous. Okay.
And
So
now my camera has
anonymous
even
data.
changed. I mean, I think what I wanted to say before. You won't believe this. My child who wanted an iPad was so pissed, so he went downstairs and switched off the Wi-Fi. and that's how I actually went offline. I think what I wanted to say, somebody who has managed this energy efficiency project. And now, as a researcher, I'm looking for data for some of the projects that we have. I just feel that right at the very beginning, when designing a project, we need to define the indicators, because it somehow feels as if, man, we've wasted so much time, so much resources. The data we have collected is not very useful. It's too general, it's about 10% energy saving potential. It's, significant energy users. But if we had to segment the sectors and say, when we go out and do this project, for this particular sector, these are the indicators that we will be collecting. That helps when you're trying to put together, even a database of energy efficiency information, because we do have data sitting at the NCPC, at SANEDI, but you can't combine all these to give you, sort of overview of what is happening, in the various sectors. It's because we were measuring and collecting data very, very differently. So, and a harmonization of what do we collect, what kind of information, regardless of who's running the project, I think that will really help, because we do have a lot of information, a lot of programs have been running in this country. And somehow we should have been able to get a clear picture of what's, but because of not being able to understand the indicators, especially from the very beginning of the program design, we now sit with information that, almost looks like it's not very useful.
Yeah.
So that's what I want.
Understood. Yeah. One thing I would say though to that is there's no point in designing indicators from an academic perspective if it's impossible to collect the data. So there is I do think there's still a bit of a chicken and egg thing going on here. Thomas could say that we absolutely must have this whole list of indicators for a particular sector, and Rosalind will say, well, you can want as much as you like, but you're not going to get that. So there is there has to be a not just a sort of definition from an academic perspective. There does have to be an understanding of what data is out there, what can be made available, what is possible to share.
Yes.
And you're right then. I mean, clearly then it's important to pull these things together. Teslim, you had your hand up. Would you like to wade in now?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mel. And thank you, Peter. That's Peter Mahuma from CSIR. Rosalind, and thanks for joining us and really giving us some good insight. I just wanted to support what Peter was saying. I mean, we're almost saying the same thing, all of us, that there's a need for us to use a sectorial approach. It's very important.
Just giving my idea.
sorry? Yes, so there's a need for us to use a sectorial approach when trying to understand energy efficiency, and also try to marry it to the indicators that we're talking about. And Rosalind has explained very clearly how it's even complex for one company to look at different plants and try to have an understanding of the drivers for energy efficiency. But government is in that space where it has to carry out such projects that you call them sort of a measuring kind of project, where it gives you a good insight into how complex these processes are, or these industrial sectors are. If you do not get your hands dirty with having that understanding, by getting to the ground level of understanding what happens in a particular sector, then it's very easy for someone to come outside this kind of forum and set those targets for your sector and go out all the way to get them gazetted by government. So yes, it is complex, but we should look at it from a sectorial approach. We should have also your energy, what Alf was saying about your energy system performance understanding, but those indicators need to be formed, and they need to truly speak to South African needs on driving energy efficiency in a sector. Thank you.
Teslim, if it's so easy, why haven't we done it?
It's not so easy, but have we tried to do it and failed to do it?
Right. So again, what's gone wrong with what we've done before? Why aren't we able to solve this issue?
Peter has said it. Projects are designed from different perspectives, and also the different understanding of the different sectors. I mean, I'm sitting as Senedi. I'm trying to enable the work as an implementation agency of the DMRE. My perception of regulation differs. I sit down as an enabler to try to support with the data collection. Rosalind is sitting down as a person who drives energy efficiency within her plans for her company. So we all have very different aims and goals, but it's almost very difficult for us to sit down here without trying and actually failing, but making those conclusions from how difficult it looks. So we have to have a common objective that, whether we like it or not, South Africa is signatory to trying to drive energy efficiency and also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Government will set those targets. They either are informed or they are blind. And we need to help government to make decisions that are well informed.
Well informed, yeah. Good,
yes.
Good point, good. So we go back to Thomas, I think, in a sense here. If South Africa was prepared to work with the IEA on the common set of indicators that we use across countries, then at least there would be clarity there about the indicators, clarity about the methodologies, and that's why we're here. That's why we were here talking about this, to try and see whether or not we can work more closely together on these things. We're close to out of time, so I'm just going to hand back to Hugo to see if he's got any comments or questions he would like to make or ask of anybody on the panel.
Thank you, Mel. Well, I just wanted maybe to highlight first, before we get to the end of the meeting, that again, this is one discussion of a series, and we will have other opportunities to share. So for the arguments and on the debate, there will be opportunity for the speakers to come with more figures and more data to support the discussions. We might be short to ask any additional questions, but we'll be happy to follow up with Rosalind, with Alf, with Mr. X that we have now identified on the different ongoing work that is being done, and again, as Teslim was saying, in the different dimensions and the different vectors that we have seen. So government, research institutions, as well as the plant on the ground and people doing the work on the ground, as well as from the academy. So if that's okay, I will be following up with you, and again, to the listeners, to the attendees, Please don't hesitate, to join our future workshops, and we'll be trying to get as many inputs as we have and have discussions and debates on how to approach this. So we might, I'm sorry for the hands that I see that are still raised. Alf, was nice to see you, but I'm afraid that we might run over time if we engage in the additional comments. On that, I'll be handing over to Mel if we want to close. Otherwise, we can say goodbye and to the next workshop.
Just thank you everybody very much for joining in, for sharing your thoughts. As Hugo says, this is an iterative process. We'll come back together. We'll have a deeper conversation about some of these aspects, and hopefully come together to help the MRE come up with a system that will be really useful to them and helpful to industry too in terms of policy setting and tracking. So thank you everybody, and have a good day.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, and apologies for the panelists that might not have had time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.